Today we're mixing an entire R&B track using Xvox Pro. Take a listen.
I'm like, oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink to meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that.
So as you can hear, it's a massive jump going from completely raw to a finished, polished mix, but I'm gonna break down every single step of the process, so you're gonna be able to follow along and see exactly how we did it. First things first, I always like to sit down to a clean, organized session. So I've colored all my tracks. I've got them organized in a way that makes sense. And I've got markers throughout the session. This way I can quickly jump around to different sections. I've also made sure all the tuning and editing is taken care of. This way I can just focus on the creative aspect of the mix. So let's look at what we have in this session. A bunch of vocal tracks. We've got some lead vocals here.
Oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door.
These vocals were recorded with an AT2020 microphone into a Scarlett interface. There's no pre-processing done. These are completely straight in with the exception of some tuning. Then we've got our beat stems here. We've got some different percussion elements. We've got our 808. And then we've got all of our synths. So the first thing I like to do when I'm sitting down to a mix like this is get a quick balance and make sure I'm not clipping the master. So I've already turned down all the track stems.
Oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door.
We actually have a pretty good balance already, just turning down all the track by a good amount. We can see that we're not clipping. I'm gonna add a limiter here at the end of the chain. I'm not really adding that much level, just to kind of catch any peaks. The next step is gonna be to get some vocal tones. I'm gonna start by loading up Xvox Pro, and I'm just gonna dial in a basic chain. I'm gonna start with some compression.
Oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink to meet me on the dance floor. Oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door.
That smooth mode puts the vocal right up in the front of the mix.
Oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door.
Now, Tyler, the vocalist here, doesn't have a harsh sibilant sound, but it's still a good idea to de-ess a little bit, especially as we start pumping in any air or high frequencies. The de-esser is just gonna help smooth that out.
Oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink to meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands and all. Want you for the night, girl, how can you say no? Oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door.
I'm bouncing back and forth between de-esser and tone.
Girl, I get my drink to meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands and all. Want you for the night, girl, how can you say no?
Already the vocal sounds like we just took a blanket off the speakers. It's so much clearer, so much more present, but I want to play around with the tone mode a little bit. So as you're playing with this, if you have trouble hearing the difference, try boosting and cutting in more extreme amounts to really hear what the difference is between the modes.
Oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink to meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that.
Obviously, that's way too much tone shaping that we're doing. It sounds unnatural, but it helps us to pick which mode. We can really hear the differences. Modern is definitely a cleaner sounding mode, whereas clear is gonna push forward the mids. It's gonna sound very clear to us.
Oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door.
And for this vocal, I love clear. It just sounds right up in your face. Dial it back into a more tasteful setting here.
Oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink to meet me on the dance floor.
Now, one handy thing in Xvox Pro is I can actually dial in the curves with these tone handles. So I'm gonna dial this low in just a little bit so I cut out any of that mud.
Oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink to meet me on the dance floor.
That sounds a lot cleaner already. Let's listen before and after Xvox Pro.
Oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink to meet me on the dance floor.
Let's move on to some reverb.
Oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink to meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands and all. Oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink to meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands and all. Want you for the night, girl, how could you say no? How could you say no?
A lot of different options here, but I'm leaning towards vibrant.
Oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands and all. Want you for the night, girl, how could you say no?
I really like the sound of the reverb and the delay. It sounds full and massive, but it is losing a little bit of clarity. And so I'm going to play around with the verb duck setting. And this is going to allow us to duck the reverb out of the way so that the dry vocal is nice and clear. So you can get even more clarity and still have that massive space.
Oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands and all.
You can hear immediately how much cleaner it sounds.
Oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door.
One more thing I might play around with here on the space is the tone slider. I'm going to do this with the rest of the beat. It's going to help place that reverb tonally within the mix.
Oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands and all. Want you for the night, girl, how could you say no?
I really like it a little bit brighter. It's favoring those high frequencies, and it just sounds a little bit cleaner with this track.
Oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now meet me.
That just helps the vocals sound massive. It takes up the perfect amount of space in the mix. It's tonally placed very well in the mix. There's one more thing I want to try on this vocal, and that's with the SFX.
Oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands and all.
I love how that sounds. It sounds big, full. Let's take a listen before and after Xvox Pro on this lead vocal.
Oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands and all.
This is a great starting point. So I'm going to copy this chain over to my other lead vocal tracks. Let's take a listen in the verses and see how this chain holds up.
Can't say no to a nigga like me. Yeah, young nigga so cool. Got these hoes on freeze.
So the verses are a lot more intimate sounding, both in the beat and the way that the vocalist is performing the track. So for that reason, I want to play around with the space. The space sounds great in the hook where it's massive and big, but in this verse, it sounds like it's kind of overpowering the track. Even choosing a different space, maybe a slightly thinner sounding one like this plate.
Can't say no to a nigga like me. Yeah, young nigga so cool. Got these hoes on freeze. All these hoes in my face, they.
Let's take a listen to the outro vocals. We might even be able to get a little bit more creative with some filters. Let's apply this low pass filter. I like how the filtered effect sounds, but I also want to apply that filtering to the reverb itself. So I'm going to use the SFX routing filter post. It's going to filter out the space as well. Apply that up here to the intro as well. Now we've got our lead vocal chain set up. It's a great starting point. Let's move on to the ad libs. Copy our lead chain down to this ad lib track. We might just play around with some of the filters.
Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking.
Sometimes a little bit of filtering on the lows and highs on the ad libs can just kind of place them one step behind the lead vocal.
And I'm like, oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands and all.
Another way to do that is with the reverb. A little bit more reverb is just going to place it a little bit further back.
And I'm like, oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now.
I'm going to play around with some of these modulation effects here. Let's try MegaMod.
And I'm like, oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that.
I love how that sounds. I also want them to feel kind of slammed. So I'm gonna play around here with some of these different dynamics modes, maybe VCA plus FET.
And I'm like, oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that. Get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands at all. Want you for the night, girl, how could you say no?
It's just kind of placing them in an interesting spot, giving you a little bit of ear candy throughout the mix.
Girl, no hands at all. Want you for the night, girl, how could you say no? How could you?
Some of these ad libs I actually want to be a little bit more full bodied. So for example, this ad lib
No hands at all.
sounds really cool with Xvox Pro set up this way. But on this vocal,
Girl, how could you say no? How could you say no?
this vocal is almost more of a lead vocal than it is an ad lib. Even though these are all in the same track, you don't have to process them the same way when you're mixing. Really listen to each individual ad lib and what does that particular ad lib need? How is it going to serve the track best? So here I've duplicated this track. I'm going to pull this ad lib down and let's process this one slightly differently.
Girl, how could you say no? How could you say no? Girl, how could you say no? Girl, how could you say no? How could you?
So I'm playing around with different effects here.
Girl, how could you say no? How could you say no?
Although I think probably just a little saturation to warm it up, open up the filters a bit.
Girl, how could you say no? How could you say no? Girl, how could you say no? How could you say no?
I also want it a little bit louder in the mix. I'm going to turn it up.
Girl, how could you say no? How could you say no? Girl, how could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no?
And I want this one to be nice and warm. I might change the tone mode to vintage, warm it up a bit.
For the night, girl, how could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no?
I'm going to put a fade over the beginning of it.
Girl, how could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no? Girl, how could you say no?
So there's different ways you could do this. You might do it with automation on your track lane. There's a technical reason that's a little bit more precise, but for this case, it works. It sounds good. I'm going to run with it like this.
Night, girl, how could you say no? How could you say no?
So on the verse vocal ad libs, I'm taking the original ad lib processing.
Yeah, nigga so cool. Got these hoes on free. All these hoes in.
So again, I like this processing for certain parts, but for others, I want it to be more full bodied. So I'm going to put those back up on the track we did here.
With me, this your only chance. And I'm like, oh, girl, you know what I'm.
Again, I like this one just kind of fading in. This one less extreme. It is kind of its own line.
With me, this your only chance. And I'm like, oh.
Let's see what we got in ad lib 3 here.
Girl, you know what I'm on. Through that door.
We're going to take the lead processing.
Girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door.
So again, just rolling off a little bit of high end, just to place this one slightly behind the main lead, which we still want to be front and center.
Girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands at all.
So now we have two different stacks of vocals here.
No hands at all.
I'm gonna pan these out.
Soon as I walk through that door. No hands at all.
So already it sounds a lot fuller, but I'm gonna pull up Xvox comp, beef these up a little bit more.
Soon as I walk through that door.
In Pro Tools, I can group these tracks, change the level all at once.
When I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands at all.
And what I'd like to do is process these all together as a group. So in Pro Tools, I'm going to create a new aux track, call it BGV bus. And I'll set the input bus 2728, and we'll set the output of all these tracks bus 2728 as well. So now we've got a background vocal bus. All the background vocals are coming through here.
But I'm on soon as I walk through the door.
Now I can apply Xvox Pro.
But I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink to meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands and all. Want you for the night, girl, how could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no? Put my hands around your body, how could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no? Girl,
I really like how that's sounding. Instead of applying the space on the actual track itself for these, I want to try using a send and return. So I'm going to create another stereo aux track, call this one BGV Verb. And on this track, I'm going to load up Xvox Space. I'm going to set the input of this track, bus 2930, and then I'm going to send all of these tracks out bus 29 and 30. And now it's time to set up Xvox Space. So with Xvox Space, I'm going to start by turning down the dry. So now we're just going to get the reverb signal when we turn this up. So I'm going to set all these faders here to 0. I'm going to turn up this reverb, and we're going to start to hear the reverb from Xvox Space.
Soon as I walk through that door, ooh.
So now I can do some different things. I can apply different amounts of reverb to different background vocals. I can also pan these into different spaces, giving it a little bit more stereo width.
Soon as I walk through that door, ooh, no hands at all.
So I want to apply less reverb to BGV high 3 and low 3. These are just kind of the centered background vocals, but I don't want as much reverb on those. I really want the reverb applied mostly on the ones that are spread out.
Soon as I walk through that door, ooh, no hands at all.
So even with dry all the way down, we can still use verb ducking here just to make sure that it's super clear and crisp when the dry vocal is there. And I'm also going to try playing around with the reverb time here.
Soon as I walk through that door, ooh, no hands at all. Soon as I walk through that door, ooh, no hands at all.
So I really like that space for the background vocal group. Let's hear it in the mix.
Girl, I get my drink to meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands and all. Want you for the night, girl, how could you say no?
I want to try playing with a few more effects on the background vocal bus, specifically this MegaMod effect. It's just going to feel a little thicker, a little bit bigger.
Soon as I walk through that door, ooh, no hands at all.
Makes it feel like there's maybe twice as many tracks as there actually are, just thickens it up in a nice way.
But I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink to meet me on the dance floor. You shake.
So let's recap what we've done so far. We've gotten a nice starting point for this mix by getting all the vocal tones set up. So let's listen before and after.
But I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink to meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands and all. Want you for the night, girl.
Already this mix is so much closer to done, and we've really just spent a few minutes dialing in some basic vocal chains with Xvox Pro. What I love about this is it's so fast to go from completely raw to sounding like this in just a few minutes. You can really do it listening through it maybe once or twice. You can get all the way to this point. We're gonna come back later in the mix and fine tune these vocals, make sure that they're absolutely perfect, but this is a great starting point. So next up, we're gonna take a look at the track. I'm just gonna mute all these vocals for now. It's mixed really well already. We haven't done any balancing here. some of these cool elements like that SFX, I want to make sure those come out enough. So sometimes with this type of beat, I like to bring out the hi-hats to add a little bit more energy. You want to make sure they don't get too loud, otherwise it'll make everything else sound kind of small and out of whack. But if you're looking for just a little bit more energy, you can bring those hats up. You can see I'm also panning them slightly left and right in order to widen that stereo image a bit. So one thing as I'm panning, I'm looking at where things are happening. For example, this perk hit is happening kind of on the right. When thinking about where to pan a similar element like this clave here, I want it to be opposite of that. I kind of want your ear to be bouncing left and right. Now something I might play around with on these deep synth parts here. So I'm going to load up Xvox Tone. And I specifically want to use this shaper mode. And I'm just going to bring up the lows and down the mids a little bit. So this particular shaper mode in Xvox Tone has this kind of magical quality to the lows, where even when you boost it an insane amount, it actually kind of cleans it up. It's due to the unique nature of this shape, which is modeled after a classic analog EQ, that it allows you to kind of bring up the pleasant lows without bringing up the muddy, kind of boxy frequencies. This is just making it sound way less boxy and way more open. When we listen with the rest of the beat, try a little bit of that on the main lead synth here as well. So this kind of curve, it's where you are boosting the lows and the highs and cutting out some of the mids. And sometimes it just makes things sound a little bit more pleasant. You wouldn't want to do it over the top on everything in your mix. Otherwise your mix will sound hollow and empty. But sometimes there's one or two elements where you just want to sweeten it up. This is a great way to do it, especially with the shaper mode in Xvox Tone. I really want that brass synth to be sizzly, and I think the best way to do that is with a little bit of Air Plus here. It's just so much more exciting that way. Now another thing I might play around with here is actually a little bit of reverb. I think it could use a little bit of washing out. So let's try playing around with some of these. Thinking musically, what is this doing to the beat here? This is kind of in the post hook. It's meant to kind of elevate and separate it from the regular hook. And this is just helping us do that. It's giving us a little bit more of a washy, high mid frequencies. We've also got this kind of breakdown here. Let's see what's happening here in the track.
You move, got me excited, babe. Bounce that ass. Bounce that ass, drop it low, move that ass, wind it slow. I'm like, oh.
So this is a really important part of the track. This is where we're getting a ton of energy. We want this to be super memorable. When this bridge happens, as it is right now in the mix, it feels less exciting. We need to make sure that this contrast works so that we feel like we're continually building as we go. So one idea to do that is to make sure that these claps are big and crispy. Right now, they're feeling a little bit dull, and I think we can brighten them up with a little air. We just want them to feel nice and crispy like that. Let's see what these hand claps are doing. Make it sound big and exciting, like there's a room of people there. Xvox comp on these and see if we can bring out some of that natural ambience of these real hand claps. Other than those, we also have these crowd vocals happening here. These definitely need to be exciting as well. Let's try Xvox comp. Let's see what these deep vox are doing. Let's copy over Xvox comp here. Okay, so now we've got a much more exciting breakdown. Let's see what happens when we put it in context.
When you move, got me excited, babe. Bounce that ass, drop it low, move that ass, wind it slow. I'm like, oh.
It sounds great, but now it makes the clap in the rest of the track sound kind of dull. And so I wouldn't mind brightening that up as well. Let's try a little air on that one.
How could you say no? My hands around you.
Might even try a little bit of air on the hats here, just to extend the highs a little bit more.
Girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands in.
So let's go back to listening to just the beat, and let's just hear before and after all of the moves we made here with Xvox tone, Xvox comp, and Xvox bass. Just a little bit more open, a little bit more polished sounding. One thing we didn't touch yet is the kick and 808. It's honestly because we don't really need to. The samples are great. The 808 sample, the kick sample, they work super well together. If something is working, don't go too crazy with it. You don't have to touch every single track in a mix in order to make it sound great. So one trick for setting the level of the vocals with the beat. Listen to the track and see what sticks out. What are some of the more forward elements? And it's usually the same types of elements, but take a listen and see if you can tell which ones are sticking the most forward in the mix. So with this particular mix, the hi-hat, the clap, those elements are jumping right out. So what we want to do when we're setting our vocal level, we want that vocal to be in front of those elements. Let's listen and see if we can kind of put those vocals right in front of the clap.
Girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands at all.
So right now, the vocal is definitely quieter than the clap.
Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands at all. Want you for the night, girl, how could you say no?
So now it feels like it's definitely in front of the clap. The vocal is more forward. It sounds louder. It sounds like it's closer to us. Let's go a little further and see if we can get away with it.
Girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands at all.
Now there's definitely commercial mixes that take this approach where the vocal is just super loud, super in your face. With this particular track, we want a little bit more balance, I think. It just feels a little groovier when there's more balance between some of the softer elements in the beat and the vocals. So let's just bring that back down and try to tuck it in to where it's still present but not overbearing.
Girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands at all. Want you for the night, girl, how could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no?
So that's feeling great. It feels like the vocals are nice and tucked into the mix. Now it's time to take it to the next level. Right now it sounds very clear, very vanilla, very basic, but we need to add some flavor to it. Let's see how we can add that with the mix. So one thing I'm going to try is putting all of this track into an aux, with the exception of the kick and the 808. We're just going to call this our instrument bus no kick. A little bit of gentle compression. I'm actually going to use Xvox comp. I'm going to use the Vox bus compressor. It's a very gentle compressor, but it does a great job of gluing things together. Let's see how this sounds.
No, how could you say no? How could you say no? My hands are on your body. How could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no? Girl, I buy it all, girl. How could you say no?
Instantly, it's more exciting. You can see as we turn this up, we're just gluing all the track together and it just sounds more exciting. It sounds more forward.
No, how could you say no? How could you say no? My hands are on your body. How could you say no?
I'm going to play around with the color here. What I'm anticipating is as I turn that color up, I'm going to start getting a little bit darker compression.
No, how could you say no? How could you say no? My hands are on your body. How could you say no?
So you can see as we got to 200, we completely dulled it out. When you're using it on an overall track like this, you want to stay away from extremes. We're going to just dial it back until we get a nice round warmth without killing any of the highs.
No, how could you say no? How could you say no? My hands are on your body. How could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no?
Play around with a little bit of tone and see if we can add a little bit more hype to this track. Again, using Shaper as a nice general tone shaping EQ.
No, how could you say no? How could you say no? My hands are on your body. How could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no? Girl, I buy it all, girl. How could you say no? No, how could you say no? How could you say no? My hands are on your body. How could you say no?
Let's just see what this is doing before and after.
No, how could you say no? How could you say no? My hands are on your body. How could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no? Girl, I buy it all, girl. How could you say no?
So let's try this same concept with vocals. We're going to take all of our vocal tracks and we're going to put them into an aux track. We're going to set the all Vox aux to accept from 3334, and then we will send all of these tracks to 3334. So now all of our Vox are coming right here in this single aux track. And let's try the same principle. Let's start with a little bit of Xvox comp.
No, how could you say no? How could you say no? My hands are on your body. How could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no? Girl,
A little bit of glue from the Vox bus is doing amazing. Let's try Xvox tone.
No, how could you say no? How could you say no? My hands are on your body. How could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no? Girl, I buy it all, girl. How could you say no?
I'm just going to move these buses down here so we can listen before and after any of the processing we just did.
No, how could you say no? How could you say no? My hands are on your body. How could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no? Girl, I buy it all, girl. How could you say no?
Adds a little bit more excitement to the overall mix. It just feels like we took it up a notch. It's a little clearer, a little bit more exciting. One thing I want to play around with is a little bit of DeEssing on the Vox aux altogether.
No, how could you say no? How could you say no? My hands are on your body. How could you say no?
So with the DS focus control, we're actually able to adjust the de-esser, figure out exactly where those harsh frequencies are, tell it to focus on those. On this particular vocal, the S's and T's are a little bit higher frequency. They're pretty crystal clear. We're just going to tame those back a little bit.
No, how could you say no? How could you say no? My hands are on your body. How could you say no?
It's just a great way to catch any harshness before it hits the mix bus. Now, when you're using the de-esser, you only want to see that meter happening when there's an S or T. So if you're seeing it all the time, you're probably dulling out your vocal a little bit more than you want to. So I like to set it just so that the de-esser is barely coming on when the S is happening. Now I want to bring the kick and 808 in. Let's go ahead and add another aux track, and we're going to call this our low end aux. We're going to set this to bus 3536, and then for just our kick and 808, send those out bus 3536. So now we've got just those showing up here.
How could you say no? How could you say no? My hands around your body.
So here I'm going to try a trick. We're going to use the amp in Xvox SFX on the low end. We're just going to dial it in ever so slightly, just to add a little bit of fuzz onto the transients of the kick and the 808. So that little bit of fuzz there is going to help it cut through. It's going to give you the feeling of a lot of bass, even on small systems without a big sub. In this studio, we've got a nice big sub, big monitor, so it feels big either way. But if you're listening on phone speakers or laptop speakers, sometimes the sub just completely goes away if you don't have any of these harmonics that are introduced by saturating like this.
How could you say no? How could you say no? My hands around your body. How could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no?
Now, one thing I want to do is add a little bit more impact. And so I'm going to pull up a stock Pro Tools compressor. This is the BF76. Any 1176 style compressor you can apply this to. And let's just see if we can add any more impact on the punch of this low end bus. So we can add a lot more impact. The problem is that we're sacrificing all the subs. We're killing all the lows by doing this. So we want to be very, very careful not to overdo it. So by just playing with the input and output so that we're getting barely any gain reduction, we're adding a nice amount of punch on the transients, but we're not killing the lows entirely. So before and after our SFX and our compression, take a listen. It's very nice, but now I want to apply one little bit of EQ just to bring back any of those lows, those subs that we want to make sure we have a lot of. Let's take a listen all together to all these buses. So we've got our Xvox, our low end, and our instrument but no kick bus.
How could you say no? How could you say no? My hands around your body. How could you say no? How could you say no?
So we're adding a lot of level with our low end processing here. We got a little bit crazy here with our lows. The way I could tell is all of a sudden we started really pumping the master bus, and that was just all those low frequencies. We got to make sure we don't have too many of those subs. They sound nice isolated, but in the context of the mix, they're overpowering. So let's try again.
No. How could you say no? How could you say no? My hands around your body. How could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no?
The mix just sounds so much bigger overall, and that's what we're getting by doing this type of processing at the bus level, meaning we're grouping a bunch of tracks together and then processing them. So now let's take a look at the mix bus. Now in Pro Tools, the best way to do the mix bus is to actually create another aux track and call it your submix. And that's because on the master track itself, the fader is pre-inserts. If you're going to do like a fade at the end of the track, you want to do your processing generally before the fader, not the other way around. So that's why having a submix is handy in this case. So we're just going to put our processing on the submix. We're going to clean up the lows with a little filter, see if we can add some excitement here in the highs and high mids.
No. How could you say no? How could you say no? My hands around your body. How could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no? Girl, I buy it all, girl. How could you say no? could you say no? How could you say no? My hands around your body, how could you say no? No, how could you say no? How could you say no? My hands around your body, how could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no? Girl, I buy it all, girl. How could you say no? No, how could you say no? How could you say no? My hands around your body, how could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no? Girl, I buy it all.
So applying this very subtle curve, you can see that we're maybe a dB at most of boosts and cuts here, but we're just kind of shaping the tone overall. At this stage, that's what you want to be doing. You don't want to be doing massive cuts. You also don't want to be trying to fix anything. If you notice any EQ issues with the track, fix it here in the faders. Don't try to compensate with your mix bus. So for example, in this track, I'm hearing the vocals. The tone I think could be a little bit smoother on some of these leads. And so let's go back to our actual processing on these and see if we can smooth this out a bit.
No, how could you say no? How could you say no? My hands around your body, how could you say no? How could you say no?
So just tightening up the tone slightly. Because of all the processing we're doing downstream now, we didn't need quite as much on the actual track itself. We just kind of tucked it back and fine-tuned it a bit. And overall, it's feeling a lot smoother now. So now I want to play around with a little bit of compression here on the mix bus. Now this is going to be very subtle, just a very low ratio, maybe 1.5 to 1, just to get a little bit of glue on the mix bus.
I wanna feel your clothes, rubbing on my clothes. Come on, girl, let's go. You're the one I chose. There ain't too much to say. I wanna see you dance. If you wanna roll with me, this your only chance. And I'm like, oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands at all.
So one other benefit to setting up your buses like this as you're mixing is that you can go back and broad strokes dial in levels. So I was noticing the kick and 808 were overpowering a bit. They just didn't feel like they were in with the rest of the track. So I can just quickly dial them down here. Same thing with the vocals. If I want to just bring them out slightly more, I can just dial them up here with the Xvox aux.
I wanna feel your clothes, rubbing on my clothes. Come on, girl, let's go. You're the one I chose. There ain't too much to say. I wanna see you dance.
Finally, I'll add some level here with Maxim.
Come on, girl, let's go. You're the one I chose. There ain't too much to say. I wanna see you dance.
Let's just listen to what all of this processing is doing.
I wanna feel your clothes, rubbing on my clothes. Come on, girl, let's go. You're the one I chose. There ain't too much to say. I wanna see you dance. If you wanna roll with me, this your only chance. And I'm like, oh.
So I've just come back from a little break and I've taken a fresh listen and I've started comparing to some commercial reference mixes. Our mix sounds a little hollow in comparison. The commercial reference mixes feel a bit fuller sounding. Now this is a common problem. The solution to it is sometimes not so obvious. And so we're gonna dig into this mix and see how we can fill this mix up and make it sound fuller overall. The tone of the vocals, it's a little bit too scooped. This is what I was saying earlier when I was saying if you do everything kind of smiley face, you kind of lose all the body of the mix. We kind of did that a little bit. So we're gonna go back to our Xvox aux, play around with the mids here and see if we can bring some of the presence back.
I wanna feel your clothes, rubbing on my clothes. Come on, girl, let's go. You're the one I chose. There ain't too much to say.
I like what that's doing to it, but another thing I want to try is actually adding a little tape saturation at the end of this vocal chain. And let's see if that also fills it out.
I wanna feel your clothes, rubbing on my clothes. Come on, girl, let's go. You're the one I chose. There ain't too much to say. I wanna see you dance. If you wanna roll with me, this your only.
Let's try playing with the same tape saturation here on the overall instrument bus. Now when the beat comes back in on the verse vocal, I want the vocal to get a little bigger. I'm going to duplicate this track. So in the first part, if you remember, we kind of dried out some of the verse for this more intimate section.
They can get out my face because I want your booty only. I wanna feel your clothes, rubbing on my clothes. Come on, girl, let's go. You're the one I chose.
But I'm gonna put that back to that bigger verb. I'm gonna put a little bit more delay in there, a little bit more reverb. It's gonna bloom open when that beat drops. Feel a little bit more like it matches the energy of the track.
I want your booty only. I wanna feel your clothes, rubbing on my clothes.
Let's play around with something to kind of polish and finish off this vocal. And I'm gonna load up Xwriter. It's gonna automatically ride the vocal level for me.
I'm like, oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands and all.
I want to apply some Xwriter on some of these ad libs here as well at the end.
Girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands and all.
It's already feeling so much better. Let's just bypass and unbypass all of our processing just to see how far we've come.
I'm like, oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands and all. Want you for the night, girl, how could you say no?
It feels super solid, it feels cohesive, clear, I'm hearing everything nicely, and it feels exciting. It's been a lot of fun using Xvox Pro, obviously for vocals. It's so fast to just dial it in, get your sound, and then you can actually go back and tweak and do all the fine tuning that you need to in order to get it to the finish line. But it's also great on all these other instruments that we used it on throughout the beat, and even on all of the buses. So have fun trying this stuff out in your next session. Thank you again for watching, and happy mixing.
I'm like, oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands and all. Want you for the night, girl, how could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no? My hands around your body, how could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no? Girl, I buy it all, girl, how could you say no? Can't say no to a nigga like me. Yeah, young nigga so cool. Got these hoes on free. All these hoes in my face, they want me to buy them drinks. They can get out my face because I want your booty only. I wanna feel your clothes, rubbing on my clothes. Come on, girl, let's go. You're the one I chose. There ain't too much to say. I wanna see you dance. If you wanna roll with me, this your only chance. And I'm like, oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands and all. Want you for the night, girl, how could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no? My hands around your body, how could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no? Girl, I buy it all, girl, how could you say no? Girl, I buy you every drink. These other bitches in the club, all them hoes look like they stink. Girl, you do your thing. You got your hand on my belt. Damn, almost just fell. You got that booty bouncing everywhere. Money, I got it. Whatever you want, you know that I got it, babe. You doing your shit. The way that you move got me excited, babe. Bounce that ass, drop it low. Move that ass, wind it slow. I'm like, oh, girl, you know what I'm on soon as I walk through the door. Girl, I get my drink, now meet me on the dance floor. You shaking all that ass, girl, no hands and all. Want you for the night, girl, how could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no? My hands around your body, how could you say no? How could you say no? How could you say no? Girl, I buy it all, girl, how could you say no?